Okay, so I'm going to give a quick introduction to Arch Linux. Who here knows what it is? And I don't mean just you've heard the word, because that doesn't count. Yeah. Okay, all right, so like a couple of you. Okay, so a disclaimer. This is not an install guide. It's just an introduction. So I'm just going to tell you what Arch Linux is and not how to use it or, well, partly how to use it, but not, a comprehensive guide. Um, so we'll start off with a stereotypical joke. How do you know if someone uses Arch Linux? They'll tell you. It's true. I wear this all the time. I use Arch Linux. I've used it now for, I don't know, I would say probably 3 or 4 years. So I've known it for a long time now. But more seriously, Arch is built on a set of philosophies. They want to encapsulate simplicity, code correctness, and minimalism. They want it to be user-centric, and they want it to be open and free for you to use it however you wish. And all of this results in the philosophy which you guys probably know, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That is their entire, not only distribution revolves around that, but also the community, the project structure, everything revolves around this philosophy. So when you start using it, you get into this mindset, and everything starts making a lot more sense when you keep this in mind. So first we'll start off with the community, because that's just as big of a item as the software itself. So the first huge thing I would say, and I guess this isn't technically the community, but the Arch build system, typically abbreviated ABS. Basically what you are able to do is, does everybody know what the FreeBSD port system is? Raise of hands? No? Sort of hand back there. So basically what it means is that you're allowed to download all of the recipes. The actual term is called a package build, but I'll talk about that later. And you're allowed to build the software, compile it any way you want, any additional flags or modifications you want to make officially. So they provide this system so that you can sync down the official package builds, modify them any way you want, and install them to your system. So it's like an easy way to build customized packages without having to worry about building them up from scratch. So you start off with a very good base template, and then you can modify it in any way you want. And I might demonstrate this if we have some time. So the next one is the BBS, and they call it the BBS. I'm not sure why still. That's a relatively archaic term, but it basically is just the Arch forms. A huge resource. If you ever need help, you can go there. Odds are the first person will tell you to search the wiki, but if there's no information or if there's a legitimate problem, people are more than willing to help out with you. I don't know, Coxon, maybe you would agree with that. I don't know if you've posted it all, but I've used it many, many times from when I was like a really stupid newbie. So I still use it now for random issues that I encounter. Next is the AUR. It's called the Arch User Repository, and people might get this confused with the ABS, but basically what this allows you to do is you can upload your own package builds, recipes, if you will, to their website, and it will parse your package build, and it will list all the dependencies and stuff and allow users to download them, compile them, and install them to their system. So it's a way for the community to create this collection of software that isn't necessarily officially endorsed by the project. So for example, I don't know if Steam is officially packaged for Arch Linux or not, but if it isn't, I can almost guarantee you there's going to be an AUR submission for it, if that makes sense. Like Sublime is another example. We all like to use Sublime. I don't believe it's officially packaged because of licensing issues, but somebody else did. So, and here's the big one. So the wiki is a huge resource. In fact, I would probably say it's one of the biggest resources in the entire Linux world. Even when I'm not using Arch Linux, I still reference it for other bits of information. So even if I'm on Ubuntu and I want to learn how some system works, the Arch Wiki is where I'm going to go to find out. Because odds are they're going to have not only an article on it, but a really comprehensive one that takes you through all the different steps and all the different options and why something is the way it is, for example. So even if you never do get into Arch Linux, you should definitely check out the wiki, because it is an amazing resource, and I think they quoted, thousands of volunteer hours have now been poured into it. So I would think it's surpassed Gentoo's wiki, which was previously regarded as like the big resource to go to. But now we'll move on to like the actual OS, and this is where I'm starting to. This is where I start to think about the KISS philosophy, because for new users, people look at Arch and they go, "Oh wow, that's scary. I don't know what to do here. How do I use this thing?" But when you put it like this, it starts to make a whole lot more sense. So we'll just go through this real quick. So you start with your file system, right? The most basic thing you can do. You need to have some sort of way to store data. On top of that, you install your own bootloader. You can pick. For example, I do dual boot Arch on my Mac here. I use the Refined, I think it's called. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's not technically a bootloader, but it's a way to choose which OS I want to boot up. Other choices, SysLinux, Grub2, of course, and probably a bunch of other obscure ones I don't know about. After that, you get the Linux kernel. Arch does not officially support any other kernels like Debian, so this is your one choice. But I think it's a pretty good choice. Then on top of that, systemd. Who here knows what systemd is? Okay, so not many people. Systemd is like it sounds. It's basically the system management daemon. So it handles starting up your computer. It handles services. It'll do all your logging for you. It'll handle containers for you. It provides dbus, if you know what that is. It's a little technical, so I'm not going to go into that now. And all kinds of other information. For example, it also has a time and date API to get the latest information depending on time zone, etc. I'll talk more about systemd later. On top of that, you have your core utilities package. And when I say package, that's really a group, and it just will allow you to install easily everything you need to get the most fundamental system up and running. For example, it'll install shell for you, so you have something to run when your computer boots. And then on top of that, we have what I like to call the Arch userland. It's not an official term, but the package managers, the various bits and pieces that Arch inserts into it, to make Arch what is Arch. And finally, you have what I call the users layer, and that's whatever you want. Whatever you want to put on your system. If you want to keep it a ridiculously minimal system where it only consumes 11 megs of RAM on startup, fine. If you want to have a beastly system that starts up and immediately opens up 90 Chrome tabs, sure, why not? I mean, that's the beauty of Arch, is that you can choose what you want. And I mean, technically on other distributions you can as well. You can take Ubuntu and start with this base server install and install just the X Windows system if you want. But it's kind of harder to break down than it is to build up. And I think Arch is probably the best distribution that does this. They make it incredibly easy to build your own distribution, essentially. So Pacman, I would say, is probably one of the defining features of Arch. As you can probably figure out, it's a package manager. It's the Arch package manager. It's incredibly fast. It's written all in C. Let's see. It's simple to use once you learn how to use it, of course. I'll touch on that in a second. But it also does package groups, like that base package. That was a package group that in turn just tells you, okay, I want all of these packages. It's a meta package, essentially. It supports signing, and the RIT mirror system has an Arch mirror. Does anybody know what the Arch mirror system is? Mirrors or mirror.rit.edu. Mirrors. If you don't use it, you should, because even if you don't run Arch, they have all sorts of other things. They have Ubuntu repositories, Fedora, FreeBSD. Kurt runs an OpenBSD mirror here. So there's all sorts of stuff. You should definitely check it out, especially because you get like 12 megs a second updates. It's cool. It's good. If you're on campus, that is, because it's hosted here. So package builds. And I can show you an example if you guys want, is a really, really basic file, and it's essentially just a shell script file. It just defines certain things. It says, for example, what architectures should this package support? i686, 64-bit, etc. What does it depend on for runtime? What does it depend on for builds? Where is the source location? So, for example, you could specify a GitHub release tarball as a source location, and then you just can insert the hash, the MD5 hash sums, so that it will verify that the download went well, etc. And then what goes along with these package builds is this program called make package. So all you need to do to use it is you enter a directory with a package build inside of it, and you simply type make package, and it will automatically try to find the package build the package by downloading all the relevant dependencies, the source files, patches if they're specified, scripts, and do it all for you. Has anybody ever tried to package on Debian or Fedora, Red Hat systems? No? Don't even try. It's the most miserable experience you'll probably ever encounter. It really is. People are hired full time just to package. It's insane. But yeah, that's this essence of Pacman. And now here are a few quick commands. So just to update all of your packages on your system, you simply run pacman syu, and that's it. Obviously, you need to be authenticated as root, but and then if you want, you can insert an optional package to install and upgrade your entire system at the same time in one line. This is simply the notation of how just to install one package without doing anything else. Search for a package, check for an installed package, remove a package along with its dependencies, install a local package, and there are probably dozens more. You can combine all these different letters in many different ways to achieve different results. And I'm not an expert on how to do all of that. I just stick with the basics. This is all I really need. So I mentioned systemd earlier, and as I said before, systemd is a system management daemon, and what that really means is we get to modernize the Linux desktop for once. I don't know if anyone here has dealt with System 5 style in it, but basically pretty much Ubuntu 8.04 and before use exclusively System 5 in it, which means that it used all shell scripting to start up the system, and as you can imagine, that's really, really slow, because not only does it have to interpret the shell scripts at boot time, it has to do lots of file redirection back and forth, so it creates pipes constantly, and that forks processes and causes all sorts of mess. And then you have issues like dependencies. So how do you start a service that requires the network before the network was even started in the first place? How do you do that? And systemd manages to solve these problems using this. Well, A, it's written in C, and B, it completely scraps the idea of shell scripts as the base way to start your system. And it does this using this massively parallelized startup process, using features like socket activation. And this is really cool because what happens is if the network hasn't started but you need a web server running, systemd will create the socket for you, tell the web server this is the socket you need to get connections from the outside world, and then it'll start the network later and pass off that socket to the network and say, okay, now use this socket for this connection. And some of the benefits you get from this are, for example, it can do socket activation, like I said here. And what that means is you can have an SSH server running, but it's not actually running. And then what happens is systemd listens on port 22, for example, and if any connection comes into port 22, it automatically starts the process and makes the connection happen. Let's see. I do believe it is the future of Linux. Fedora is using it now, which means Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 will be using it. Arch uses it now. OpenSUSE uses it, and Ubuntu finally decided to move to it after much fighting. I guess that also warrants mention of Debian, because Ubuntu is only moving to systemd after Debian decided to go that route. I don't know how many people here are familiar with that whole debacle. It was all over the R Linux subreddit for many, many, many weeks. I won't get into that now. But, other nice things that, kind of pulls the Linux world into the modern age is we get, some basic command line clients just to interact with your system. You don't have to execute random shell scripts that are written by, a 19-year-old once back 10 years ago and haven't been touched since. So it's my personal belief that moving forward, using this software is what is really going to challenge the OSs like Windows for a service. Not that, Linux is doing bad on the server, it's just competition's good. So there are also a couple of myths out there, I believe. Yeah. So the first one is it breaks often. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Arch is a rolling release distribution. Does everyone know what that means? So it basically just means that as new software is released, Arch will do its best to update your system in as little time as possible. So whereas other distributions wait 6 months for every new release and they don't update the software in that, they instead just do bug fixes, Arch will push out new versions as they come in for you. So you install your system once and you never reinstall it again. There's no upgrading ever besides package upgrades. And that's where a lot of the complaints about it breaks often comes in. And I think that was true more towards the beginning of the distribution's lifetime, way back in 2003 through 2008 or so. But the distribution has matured quite a bit. And personally, I had a desktop running, for a year or so, just updating it every day, and I've never encountered any issues. That being said, there are definitely times when upgrading is going to be a challenging task. For example, when they moved from the old style init system to the new systemd, lots of stuff had to change underneath. So what they did was, and what they do is they post on their blog, and they say, look, these are the steps you have to take. Here's what you need to be aware of before you upgrade your system. So you just need to be aware of any major changes that might be coming down the pipe. But other than that, you should not ever really have a problem. And if you do, file a bug. The next one, hard to install. It's probably the biggest reason that people don't want to give Arch a try. And to be fair, I think there is some truth to it, but I think it's scary than it is actually hard. Again, if you use the wiki, they lay out the steps in almost I don't even know what to say, like a stupid user. They make it incredibly idiot-proof. There we go. And you know what? Let me show you guys real quick.
They actually put the wiki article within their live booth when you're live booting, so you don't actually need the internet.
That would be embarrassing if it was down. So here's the beginner's guide. And there is quite a lot of information here. And they go through everything. If you just look at the table of contents. Oh my gosh, there it is. If you just look at there's a whole section on just before you even install. And then they go through every tiny little step with you. They go over how do you connect to wireless. My MacBook here doesn't have an Ethernet port on it. So the only way I can get an internet connection in the installer environment is to use wireless. but it was relatively painless because it laid out steps on how to do that. But that's just one example of how much information you can get from the Arch Wiki. And it is kept up to date, I would say probably 99% of the time. Play. Another one that I hear a lot too is that it's hard to use. And I would say that it's only as hard as you make it to use. Everyone here knows what GNOME is, KDE. Pretty standard desktop environments. If you install that, you probably can't even tell the difference between, an Arch install and a Fedora install. So what really makes it more difficult to use, other than the fact that you have to use Pacman? But that's okay. You should learn how to use Pacman because it's the best package manager ever. It really is. I used to think apt-get was a great system. No, Pacman blows it out of the water. Another one, and I guess this kind of ties into some of the early ones, but difficult to learn. Again, if you just utilize the resources that the community has put together, if you utilize people like me and Coxon, we can easily, well, not easily maybe, but we can help you through the process of, getting over the initial learning curve. And once you get over the initial learning curve, I think you'll see that it's really worth it to learn how something like this works, because it also helps you understand the underlying Linux systems. For example, systemd. Systemd is not specific to Arch. It's going to be used everywhere now. So, for example, if you're on co-op and you're on a Linux system and you need to do something, it's definitely nice to know how most Linux systems work because you'll feel right at home. And the last one, documentation is lacking. And I think, as I've proved, well, I've only shown you one thing so far, but you can look for yourself. I think this issue specifically has been torn apart by the Linux community in the last 10 years or so. There's the Linux documentation project. You have the Gentoo wiki. You have Ubuntu's documentation. Arch's, which I think is the best. So I really do think that that is a myth. Some of these other ones might have varying degrees of truth to them, but I really think that that's a complete myth. So, why should you use Arch at all? Like I said, it really does help you learn how to use Linux in the first place. You get to learn about not just like the kernel, but low-level stuff. How do I configure networking without a system daemon to hold my hand through the process? You're allowed to get your hands dirty. You can build your OS any way you want. So like I said earlier, if you want an extremely minimal system that only consumes 11 megs of RAM on initial boot up, that's your prerogative. You can do that if you want. If you want to run multiple X servers with a different desktop environment on each of them and switch back and forth between them using the virtual terminal keys, go for it. They're not going to stop you. They might not help you in supporting it, but my point still stands. Rolling release, as I mentioned before, all new software is going to try to be pushed out as quickly as they can. That does not mean that they necessarily push out the new software the same day that it's released, because they still do go through a testing phase. So, for example, a GNOME 3.12 was just released, 3 or 4 weeks ago, or March 26th, about. So it did take like 2 weeks for me to receive that new upgrade because it stayed inside of an unstable repository first, and once the devs were satisfied with its stability, they moved it into testing, and then it went to the live repos. And you will be the first to get the new software. You won't have to install, Ubuntu's unstable, Alpha 3 to get the latest version of software. You won't have to install Debian's unstable distribution. You'll get the latest software without having to jump through any hoops. If you want to stop distro hopping, who here has distro hopped before? Yeah, I think this is the distribution to stop it. I've used tons and tons and tons of distributions, and as soon as I reached this one, for some reason there was just something about it that I was done. This is the one I want. unless they take some weird direction in the next couple of years, I don't think I'm ever going to move. But I'm sure that's kind of an opinionated thing, but I feel strongly about it. And it's fun, and you'll be one of the cool kids. Right, Coxon? He's got a matching sweatshirt in case you didn't know or seen us around.
We didn't buy it together.
They were gifted to us by a coworker.
We had to go shopping together.
Went shopping on Zazzle. All right. That being said, Arch is not for everyone. Why not? Why? There aren't any reasons. Arch is for everyone. Just kidding. I'm completely screwing with you guys. So there are definitely a few things that you should take into consideration when using Arch. Number one, if you have an Android app due the next day, probably not a great time to start messing around with Arch. For your first time, it's probably going to take you a solid couple of hours to get up and running. If you need a stable server, and by stable, and that's why I put the asterisk there, I don't mean it's going to break often. I mean you're going to get updates every day. And typically in a server environment, you don't want that. You want to have a lot more time to verify updates in batches instead. Just an example. Another one, if you don't want to maintain your OS. And again, I put an asterisk next to that because what I mean by that is if you just want to set it and forget it, Arch is probably not the distribution for you. Then again, the only maintenance that's really required is a Pac-Man SYU, probably at least once a week. So I don't really think it's that much effort, but some people, it's just not for them. And I think that's fine. Fourth thing, if you need anything other than traditional x86, 64-bit, or ARM support. Other distributions like Debian support insane architectures that no one's even heard of, but Arch Linux is not going to do that for you. I put yet another asterisk next to ARM because ARM is not actually officially supported by the Arch Linux project. It's a separate volunteer project, I think archlinuxarm.org. But they, for example, they have a port for the Raspberry Pi. I think they have a port for the Samsung Chromebook 11 and probably a couple other dev boards. And finally, if you really hate Linux, Arch Linux is not for you. It's pretty self-evident, but whatever. So, you want to get started. How should you do this? I would definitely start by reading the wiki. There are a couple different ways to really get into it, though. You can use a VM, although I really think that you should install on your base system or in your just from scratch if you really want to learn how to use it, because otherwise you're probably going to be more tempted just to use the OS that you're used to already, and you won't learn as much. But for the more skittish people, a VM is an easy way to start, and there's plenty of support for VirtualBox, VMware, KVM, and probably all the other hypervisors under the sun. But again, I would definitely stress the Arch Wiki. Just reading through it before you even attempt an install is probably a good thing anyway. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely go to the wiki. And that's how I got started. It's a good way to get started. But let's say that you're already in, Arch and you want to contribute back somehow. There are definitely a number of different ways. Introduce people to Arch, like I'm doing right now. Other things like bug reporting. There are bugs that crop up. It's obviously not a perfect system. I've reported bugs before and gotten them fixed, or the devs will, resolve them as duplicates or something. It doesn't matter. No one cares. Just report a bug if you see it. You don't have to worry about offending anyone or worrying about if it's in the right category or where it should go. If you just report it, you've contributed, and other people will triage it better. The forums, another great place, either contributing or just lurking, but another wealth of information there. Definitely give that a shot. Again, even if you aren't an Arch user, the forums are a great place. There are people from FreeBSD that comment on Arch threads, commonly. So it's not unusual to see non-Arch users on there. If you want to host a mirror, that's a little bit more of a daunting task because you're going to have a lot of bandwidth and have to have a lot of disk space, etc. But the option's out there. Or you could see the ISO, BitTorrent, a legal way to do it, so you don't have to worry about getting caught. And finally, donate some money. I haven't done this yet, but I'll do it eventually. I will. I super promise. But that is a brief introduction to Arch Linux. Does anyone have any general questions? Matt.
So there aren't like major versions of Arch, right?
No.
There aren't.
No. So the way it works is they roll new ISOs every month, and all that means is they just include the latest versions of the software and put it up. And that way their servers don't get hammered every time somebody wants to install Arch for the first time.
So there's no like Arch version X.
Nope. Here, I'll show you real quick.
I mean, they have revision history.
Yeah, like they use Git.
Right. There's up to date and not up to date. Exactly. So it's like Skype.
So here's the current release, and all they do is it's just the date. So I guess yesterday they released a new ISO, and that's all they do. So this is actually a really cool ISO too, and I think Arch was the first one to do it. It contains both 32-bit code and 64-bit code. You can burn it to a CD and directly write it to a USB, and every single one of those will work without you having to do anything weird. So you don't have to use any of those weird startup creators or unet boot. No, none of that crazy stuff. You just dd if of done. I don't. This worked for me just fine when installed on here. And this is a UEFI system. 2.5 years ago. I would say UEFI was a little bit more flaky back then too. It's definitely gotten a lot better. And it worked with, this is a Haswell MacBook, so it was just released in the summer or in the fall. And so it's relatively good hardware support too.
So what would I have to do if I wanted to get like be part of that, devs getting the packages as soon as they get released, unstable Arch?
Wait, so you want to,
The unstable package.
so you can do that if you want. You can become part of the testing repo, and all you need to do is inside of your Pacman configuration is just say, hey, I want testing. And then you'll start getting even more updates. I mean, I'm fine with not, but did I? Oh, cool, I did start it. All right, so this is. Cool. This is really annoying that it isn't mirrored, but whatever. So, for example, here's just a quick Pacman SYU. That's not SYU. Oh, look, an update.
Why is the upgrade yet?
And it's done. I know, it's great. When you watch your system install size go down, it's great. Let's see. I guess I have used a little bit more, but I think with GNOME installed, it uses about 1.5 gigs out of the box. And GNOME is a pretty full-featured desktop environment, I would say. So it's also got a really, really slim install base too. Coxon, you have, 16 gigs?
16 gigs of SSD on my Chrome. And I put Arch on it.
And you posted to our battle stations recently, and someone suggested you upgrade your hard drive, and you're like, nah, dude, I don't need to. Let's see. Do I have anything? No. I can take you to. So here's the ABS system I was talking about. So all you need to do to get like the latest packages or the package recipes is that command, and then it'll do its thing. And then you just go into the directory var ABS, and then I don't know. Let's go into core. tar, let's say. So, and there's only these two files in here called package builder and tar.install, and this is actually an optional. This won't necessarily come with every package, but for example, let me just copy it to my home folder and make package. It might complain about something, but now it's doing it all for me. It's creating a package all on its own. I don't have to do anything weird. It's doing it all for me. And it's going to spit out what's essentially a tarball, just a tarball with some specialized structure in it so that Pac-Man knows what to do with it. Of course, I guess I don't know how big tar is, so this could actually take a while. But yes, Coxon. I actually believe their latest ISOs require an internet connection, but I'm not 100% on that. I've never done an offline install because, I mean, internet. Okay, I mean, all right, now it's actually compiling stuff. Yay, hurry up. Matt.
So how well supported are popular development tools on Arch, and is it easy to get them?
Such as, I mean, come on, Vim.
How about languages and
Yeah, so, I mean, Python's a thing.
you have to install all this stuff yourself.
Well, it depends. So, like, some packages we're going to require Python, and it'll pull it in for you. So,
And is it basically anything you want you can get through Pac-Man?
almost. So, there's the official repositories, core, extra, community, multi-lib, testing. Those are the 5 official ones. Obviously, there's one for 32-bit, one for 64-bit, but not every piece of software is going to be in those repositories. But that's what I was talking about earlier with the AUR, and I guess I can show you that real quick. So you can see right there. So here's a bunch of packages that aren't in the official repositories, but users have uploaded some. So I've actually uploaded one myself. Does everyone know what ZFS is? Anyone? It's the zettabyte file. Actually, it isn't called that anymore. It used to be called the zettabyte file system, developed back in Sun, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to know about it. All you need to know is that it's a package that's not offered by Arch by default. So, and there were some packages already, but I didn't like them because they required me to do some extra work, and I didn't want to do extra work. So I created this package build. I'll show it to you right now. And this is all that is required. So you just define the package name, the version, the package release, your description, what it depends on, and yes, you can use variables inside. The architecture it'll support, the upstream URL, the actual source, a group if you wish to define that, MD5 sum to verify that your download was okay, your license, an optional install script, and then there's just a couple of basic functions that you have to fill out. There are lots more, and you can read more on the Arch Wiki, surprise, surprise. But this is a really basic package build, and that's all you need to do to build a package. Oh, is there? Let's go. I'm not going to install it right now. I hate JSpin. Look, JSpin, here it is. Look at that. Oh, even simpler. I don't know how much more simple you can get than that. You guys should check out like a Debian package or something. There you go. Finally, we have someone. So you know what it takes to build a Debian package? Yeah, this is kind of the same thing with Fedora / Red Hat / OpenSUSE / whatever. Any other general questions? Comments, concerns, queries, conundrums? Yes, it is. It's actually 3.4. Oh, look, it's still compiling things. Oh, there we go. It just finished. Look at that. All right, so let's take a look and see what. there's your package right there. And like you said, it's a simple tarball with this PKG extension kind of thrown in there. Yeah. By default, there might be a make package flag to cross compile it or something. I don't know. I've never done it because why would I? I mean, I suppose. But then to install this local package, you just use the -u command, and it's like, yo, dude, do you want to install this? And you're like, yeah, I do. And that's it. Well, that's because I had tar already installed, and I just overwrote it with my own version, which probably just screwed Pac-Man up a bit, but that's okay. Now I probably won't update, but I can undo that. It's fine. Hey, Pac-Man is fast. It's good. There's probably no other questions. Matt!
So is there a reason that I should leave my cushy Mac OS X for Arch other than
I have a reason for you. I plugged his HDMI cable in and it crashed my Mac like 5 times. Let's see. Some other things. So systemd. So the command to interact with systemd, the main command, is systemctl, and it gives you all sorts of fun information about what's running on your system, what isn't, what's stopped, what isn't. Let's see. Systemctl status. And it'll give you like the latest, log messages. It'll tell you which C group it's running under. Does everyone know what it's? Probably not. A C group is a control group, it's called. It's a relatively new feature of the Linux kernel that allows you to track processes a whole lot better. Before, init systems would spawn processes and then kind of forget about them. Didn't really know they existed anymore. So, there's a whole nother talk on systemd, so I'm not going to get into it that much.
Is there any other distro with 314 with Linux 314 right now?
Fedora Rawhide, which is the development version of Gentoo. So Gentoo is another source-based, Arch is not a source-based distribution. It's a binary distribution, which means that you never actually compile things if you don't want to. Gentoo is, or Gentoo. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to shave mine. Any other questions? Whoa, Matt. Well, that's what I was just going over earlier, is that Arch used to have its own init system. It was more of a BSD style init system, in that there was only one run level, where a run level is a target state that the init system wants to get to. For example, you want to have your display server running on boot up. A run level would allow you to specify what you want running at some target. In the BSD world, there's only one of those. In the Linux System 5 init world, there was usually about 5 of them, where number 3 was like your user level. But systemd does away with all that kind of. They replace it with what's called a target. But yeah, no, this is also, I touched on this earlier, is that I think all Linux distributions are going to standardize on systemd, which, hallelujah. We're trying to like move forward in this world and really have a good, solid competitor. And I think, past 5 years, plus a couple years from now, we're going to have a really, really solid system to work with, with new things such as Wayland coming out, if you know what that is. Can't wait. No, it's $1,500. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, it's all free. Although you should donate, even though I haven't yet. Well, you should really only donate if you actually feel compelled to. You shouldn't donate to a project that you don't have any interest in. I mean, I guess you can, but whatever. Yeah. And there's lots of other fun stuff, and we could go on forever about this. Yeah. It does not. Vi does. No, it does not. No, it does not. Well, the only thing I believe that's really required to boot your system technically is 3 packages: grub, well, whatever bootloader you want, Linux, and shell.
What about Pac-Man?
Oh, technically you don't need it. It doesn't force you to install it. It doesn't. It's optional. You probably should install it if you want a nice maintainable system, but you don't have to. You can do the Slackware style where you just maintain everything yourself. Doesn't that sound like fun? No, I've got classwork to do. I don't have time for that. There's other fun things like journalctl, which is the logging component of systemd. Lots of fun stuff here. We have fun and usability with our server that runs playing with this. Yay. I mean, that's actually really not that interesting. Logs. Logs, yay. I don't know. What else is there? I mean, there's lots more, obviously, but questions, comments? Are we done? Cool. Matt.
So, from a clean installed Arch, how long does it take to get productive
For me? Or for someone else?
for a new user? Say?
For a new user, I would...
New user that has like
A new user who has done their research, I would say probably a couple hours. Like, done their researches and they went through the documentation beforehand and stuff like that. Me, I kind of know it by hand now, so I can do it in 10 minutes. But I'm crazy, so...
oh, and then some basic understanding of like Linux.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider that a prerequisite, but it definitely helps you a whole lot if you're at least coming from a different distribution. If Arch is your very first Linux distribution, a weekend? More? I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else. Now are we done?
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.